Where there is injury or pardon, Lord, and where there's doubt, true faith in you.
Two of the most important leaders of the early church were Saints Peter and Paul. We like to imagine that these two apostles were friendly co-workers, but that was not always the case. In Galatians, Paul mentions a sharp disagreement he had with Peter over the question of how Gentile converts should be welcomed into the church. The specifics are outlined in Acts 15. Did Gentiles have to follow Jewish dietary customs and observe circumcision when they became Christians or not? Behind those questions lay a deeper one. Was Christianity going to remain a sect within Judaism, or, while honoring its Jewish heritage, become something new? Paul assumed he and Peter had agreed at a meeting in Jerusalem that Gentile converts did not need to observe Jewish customs when they became part of the church. But evidently, Peter vacillated, jeopardizing the church's mission in Paul's view. When he and Peter met in Antioch, Paul angrily confronted Peter, as Galatians 2 records. When Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood self-condemned. For until certain people came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But after they came, he drew back and kept himself separate for fear of the circumcision faction. And other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy. As this disagreement between Peter and Paul shows us, conflict has been present in the church since the earliest days. Anytime people feel passionately about something, there is likely to be conflict. Conflict is not necessarily bad, even in the church, because it means that passion and energy are present. The question for a church facing conflict is this: how do the passion and energy that are creating conflict get redirected into ministry and mission? Peter and Paul, despite their differences, were clear about the compelling power of the gospel. They got past their disagreements and got on with the work of ministry.
God is pouring out His grace through the waters of baptism.
We began this series with baptism. When you were baptized, God came to the water calling your name and made you part of the church. Truthful naming has been part of our faith tradition from the very beginning. When God called to Moses out of the burning bush, Moses asked for God's name, and it was given. When Gabriel visited Mary and told her she was to bear God's son, the angel said his name would be Jesus. Luke tells us that when Jesus cast many demons out of a desperately sick man, the Lord first asked, "What is your name?" In truthful naming, there is power. Resolving conflict in the church begins with truthful naming. What is the real issue causing the conflict? Is it fear of journeying to a new place because the present one is comfortable? Is something in the congregation's sacred bundle being threatened? Is there reluctance to accept the responsibilities of true Christian discipleship? Is there misunderstanding of the church's mission? Truthful naming can be painful, but it is critical if conflict is to be addressed honestly.
Where there are two or more persons, there shall be conflict. No, let me back up. Where there's one or more. Actually, to answer your question, I think we do a disservice to Christ and His church when we don't confront the negativity that comes in ways of cancerous, toxic situations.
Be extremely honest. Be extremely honest. Too many times I've come to congregations where something was going on and everybody knew it except me. And either no one was willing to talk to the district superintendent about it when they made a change, and no one was willing to talk to the new pastor who was about to come in. I don't know, they didn't want to make them be all anxious perhaps, but as soon as we get here, oh, by the way, there's this issue that's been going on. I'm like, okay, great, I didn't know that. That would have been helpful. I could have done some sort of preparation to try to get ready for this particular issue. But all too often, those things come up, and you hear about it after you get here.
I'm a newcomer here, and it was easy for me to see the love of the community and the fellowship and the warmth of the community, but I also could see how a family church has certain characteristics that make it hard for newcomers to come into because we're not related. And so in this first year, while people were interested in different goals, it was hard for us to name and say, this is the one thing that's most important to us right now.
The greatest difficulty there often is when the pastor parish committee refuses to send these people to the pastor when they come with a complaint, but rather allows them to complain anonymously and turns the pastor parish committee into basically nothing more than a complaint department.
I've realized that a lot of times it is very important to go ahead and address or to name what is going on. And I found that a lot of times my people, especially in this church, they were not really ready for that. But as we continue to do that, they are becoming empowered themselves. And just by listening and talking and meetings, I think we have a good blend.
We've been leaning on Ephesians 4 and talking about how a church talks to one another, how people are to communicate with one another. And the other thing we've been working through is something called circle manners, where we learn about how to be in conversation with one another. How do we acknowledge where we are spiritually and emotionally? And that has been helpful too, in that just seeing each other as brothers and sisters in Christ and not as adversaries.
Is when I've got a tough situation with staff or with a lay leader, I bring them in and I always say something like this. I say, look, you don't want to deal with this and I don't want to deal with this, but I love you too much and you're too important to the ministry of this church for us not to. So, I think we're going to come out on the other side even better. So let's just get into it and get on to the other side. And I just start. 99% of the time, we do come out on the other side better. And the conflict is resolved, and everybody is better able to serve the kingdom because of it.
I think that knowing the amount of conflict and controversy and stuff that comes up when you work in such a passionate place, where people really care about what's going on. SPRs that can be supportive and be another voice for saying, let's talk this out. Just being supportive, and it doesn't always mean being, pastor's always right, but it does mean not always assuming that the pastor's screwed up again. What's the whole picture?
But in any meeting, you got different ideas and opinions, but after that is hashed out, I think we still love each other and come out in unity.
When there is conflict in a congregation, the ministry of the Staff Parish Relations Committee is vitally important. Each member should be clear that the mission of the church, to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, is of utmost importance. When that mission is impeded, God's intended future for the congregation is delayed. Your committee ought not function as a forum for irresponsible criticism or for unexamined comments about the pastor or any aspect of the church's ministries. The waters of baptism call us to a more gracious and thoughtful response.